mass shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years?
Counting or not counting gang violence?
Great.
I think we have to consider all options until the suspect has been perpetrated as to whether it was professional or amateur. But what I could say is that, in my estimation, it could have been achieved by an amateur. It was less than or approximately 200 meters from the stage, if it was indeed the person on the roof, with a high velocity, high caliber weapon. I would guess maybe a .308. And if someone had good optics, a good telescopic sight, and they had some experience of hunting or shooting on range, it is not an unachievable shot to take. So I wouldn't discount it being necessarily professional, but equally I wouldn't discount it being an amateur. There are some rifles, again depending on what this rifle proves to be, that you can collapse, you can fold, you could conceal within say a large holdall or certainly within a large backpack. But again, it's going to be a question of how would you manage to get into the venue with something like that without there being bag checks or sufficient security into other areas which are outside the whole arena of where the event is taking place, that someone can go in unchallenged or gain access with something which is in many regards very difficult to conceal. There was most certainly advanced reconnaissance. The stage, till such time as it was determined where, and unless at this particular venue, it was a constant of if there are any guest speakers, they will always be in the same position. This individual would have done the research to determine that. They would have secondly determined the best location for them to take that shot. And that would mean that they would need to get full access right up to the location where they took that shot, which would mean that they would have to have the access control cards to get into the building, to get into the stairwell, unless obviously it's a fire escape stairwell, which then would be push to exit, but then to gain access to the roof. And I've worked with a number of companies over the years, and one of the things that they've always been conscious of is to ensure that roof access could only be achieved by security, maintenance, or someone working within facilities. So the circle of individuals that would have the permission to gain access to the roof will be very small. And again, part of the security planning in advance by the security team would be to see who does have access. But for this individual, it could have been days, it may have been multiple times. Again, it's difficult to say right now without knowing more information. But this could have been planned over weeks or certainly days, but certainly once there was confirmation that Charlie Kirk was going to be in attendance. If the individual that's been spied lying prone on the roof and subsequently, once the shot had been delivered, started running away across the roof, was indeed the assassin, there are so many questions to be raised at the security team that they weren't, certainly in almost a year since Donald Trump's similar assassination attempt being made, that the security team weren't actually keeping eyes on those roofs to check. And there have been occasions, I with a principal, where if there's anything that I feel is suspicious or could be of concern, you take a brief break. You take the principal off the stage, you ask people to be patient, you investigate it, you interrogate it, you find out whether it is indeed a threat, and if it's not, then you continue. One of the things which is not surprising in many ways, but disappointing, is the number of individuals that have been detained as the suspected shooter and then subsequently released. And I understand that the police and law enforcement will throw their net far and wide, but certainly there needs to be intrinsic investigation, reverse engineering of how this individual managed to get into the building, who they might be, and what their route of exit would have been from that location. I feel that certainly with Donald Trump involving himself with a statement specifically on Charlie Kirk's death, that all the weight and the power of the FBI will be thrown behind this. And I'm sure in time, the perpetrator will be apprehended. I caution people to start running down the rabbit holes of conspiracy theories and deal with what we actually physically know. But this gets quirked and it gets influenced by what we see on social media and commentators making their points. Now, it's understandable that law enforcement will keep their cards close to their chest as they conduct their investigations. But sadly, that void is filled with individuals that believe they have some understanding of the situation or some interpretation. And we've seen this many, many times before, where a scratch of the nose or an adjustment of a hat or the folding of the arms is supposed to be an indicator of a green light for an action to take place. It isn't necessarily as straightforward as that. And if there are collaborators in situations, they're usually more sophisticated, certainly if they're professional, and more often than not, because if it's an event that is covered by the media and these days people with their own phones, everything is going to be interrogated intrinsically. So any gestures or signals being sent would be a heck of a lot more subtle than that. Very sadly, the attack on Charlie Kirk yesterday doesn't come as a huge surprise. We've seen this increasing division between liberals and far left to conservatives and far right. And as we understand it, there were a number of dissents received by the university prior to this event saying that he was not welcome to be on campus. And it was only a matter of time before something like this was possibly going to happen. Having looked after a number of principals myself, some of whom could be deemed as controversial, and protected them at similar types of events, it's always very difficult to make comment on another security provision. But suffice to say that there was a major failing in how they planned the security around Charlie Kirk, albeit they were working within the limitations of their experience. But those security will be haunted by this event for the rest of their lives. But there could have been a number of things implemented to make it far less easy for a would-be assassin to carry out an attack like this. If I was to take an objective view of how I would have secured Charlie at this particular event, and again, I know very little about what the security team actually did, so they may have made some of these particular measures and put them in place. But the first thing would be to see where Charlie was conducting his talk. And you stand or you sit where that principal is going to be giving that talk to see what direct line of sight is there to him or her. Beyond that, you then look at those locations to seeing how you can secure against those locations being compromised. You also work with the venue to determine the controls to certain areas which you can't necessarily provide because you don't have the manpower or you don't have the resource to be able to apply to those locations. So for example, the roof areas, what access is afforded? Is it on an access control key? Who has that key? Have there been any losses of access control cards recently that could have been utilized by someone who stole it for this particular purpose? But you also look at the people in the crowd, and sometimes your best defense and your best support, in addition to all the other security measures you put in place, are going to be other people in the audience. Because if someone produces a weapon, people, if they're in close proximity, are either going to intervene, they're going to alert security, they're going to scream, they're going to shout, and again, it will make it very difficult. So there are places that you can put people, there are places that you can control and lock off, and certainly from what I could see, if one of his security was the gentleman in the black polo shirt standing behind him, why was he standing behind him? I will always be standing in front of my principal, albeit even at a lower position or off to the side, so that I can be there